everybody, it's Liz here. You must think where I live is sunny all the time, but this is like really rare. Every time I've gone to do a video for this channel, it's been sunny. I mean, look. Whee! Sunshine, which makes filming annoying because I could move and make it much better, but I sit in this chair. I have my dressing gown on because it's cold despite the sun, and I have my feet up on this footrest. What do you call it? Like reclining chair. So I thought I would kind of twist my head. Anyway, I thought it'd be useful to just talk about in general, like if you use a wheelchair for EDS, but if you use a wheelchair for any other condition, this might help. Oh, my hair's going crazy. Just things I've come across that annoy me or what I prefer people to do. And so if you don't use a wheelchair, this would help somebody maybe share the video to understand how people in the wheelchair feel and how not to patronise them, because that's a big thing. So I'd start with actually someone I know who lives in my town with EDS. Actually, I met up with them. Didn't meet up with them, but I met them when I was going to the supermarket. And they actually made a really good, not a point, but there's a phrase that she used, because I said how one of the really things that when I go shopping, I go on my own if it's a small shop. So in my chair, I'll hold the basket because my bag's hanging on the arm of my chair. I'll have the basket on my lap, or I can sometimes balance the basket on my feet because my legs are elevated. But if it gets too heavy, then it hurts because the basket digs into my legs and my feet. But the annoying thing I get is don't mind if I'm going around the aisles and I'm struggling clearly to get something off a shelf. Usually you get someone asks, do you want me to help? And I'm always say yes, because you don't want to hurt yourself, overstretching or fall out your chair. If it's something that's what does annoy me is if you're shopping and it's on level with your eyes or your arms, or you can clearly get it, and someone walks up to you and goes, can I help you get anything? And I'm like, well, clearly I can use my arms and my body and I'm not completely stupid. And I would actually seek out people. There's always someone on the shop floor who works at the shop stacking shelves or something. Or even at the tills, there's usually a supervisor. If there's something I really need and I can't reach and there's no one around or something like that, then I will ask, please can you reach this for me? And they always will. No one's ever going to say no to somebody asking. But the thing that annoys me the most is at the checkout, I'm queuing behind somebody, say, and they've the whole conveyor belt. I do always go to a till with conveyor belt unless I've literally got 2 or 3 things, because I like to pack my own bag, because I used to work for Tesco and after I finished school for a few years, and so you get actually taught how to pack bags, and I was pretty good at packing bags. And when you use a wheelchair, the way your bag is packed is so important, because sometimes they try and shove everything in one bag. And if you hang your bag on the back of your wheelchair, then if it's too heavy, if you've got a manual chair, you could tip back. But also if it's too full, the bag, when you hang it on the back, starts to split. Or if you're going to carry it on your lap, you don't want it too heavy, or you don't want all the frozen stuff in the bottom, because you'll get a really cold lap. So I always say, no, I pack my own bags, whatever. But when you're at the checkout and there's people in front of you, I go to the ones with the conveyor belt because you've got plenty more room. And if you do need help packing your bags, they ask and all that. And obviously I take my own recyclable bags. So, yeah. And you could at the checkout and someone's in front of you, and it doesn't matter what age they are, or who they are, or turn around and go, oh, do you want me to help you unload your shopping? And I'm thinking, well, if you'd been with me like the whole way around the shop, that would have been a lot easier, because there's some things that I struggle to reach, or some things that I really can't reach, and I can't be bothered to like go and find someone and ask and think, oh, I'll just get it another time, or I'll ask my husband when he next goes shopping to get it. Or just to do my shopping for me would be really nice. That would save time. But they ask you right at the end, and I clearly can lift the basket up sometimes if it's light enough onto the checkout conveyor belt bit, or have it in my lap and start unloading. So I think clearly my arms work. I'm not stupid. And so usually they'll not say nicely, would you like any help? Or whatever. And I'll say, no, I'm fine, thank you. And they go, oh, no worries. Or sometimes they go, oh, I can see you're very independent. And I think that for me is absolutely a great answer. But when they persistently ask, they're like, would you like any help? And I say, no. And then they go, oh, no, I can help, don't worry. And I'm like, no, it's fine, honestly. And they go, are you sure? And I'm like, yes, like, just leave me alone, for goodness sake. And this actually happened to me in Tesco's once. When I was at the checkout, the man at the checkout, I remember it was Christmas because he was wearing a stupid Christmas jumper. And he was this older man, and I actually made an official complaint to Tesco's about him, because I had like a basket on my feet and a basket on my lap, and I was unloading, and I like to take my time, and then I like to pack a certain way so that everything fits like I mentioned, and all the bags are like weighed out evenly. And he got out of his seat at the checkout, came round the checkout to me in my chair, took the basket off me, started unloading everything. I said, no, I'm fine. And then he was like, no, I'll do it. So I was like, oh my goodness. And then when I got to the checkout, he was like, do you want me to pack? I was like, no, I've got my own bags. He took my bags off me and started packing. And I was just like so surprised and taken aback that I was like, whoa. So luckily I kept my receipt, and I put a complaint in, because on your receipt it tells you what till you were at and what time, so they can then figure out who it was. And so I put a complaint in, and then I went a couple of weeks later, and the same man I deliberately avoided. So I went to but all the other checkouts were really full. So I went to the checkout next to his, and his was empty. And I think he was like, oh, maybe, the complaint obviously hadn't reached him yet. Or it had, and he just didn't take any notice, because I was queuing up and I was putting my stuff on, and he comes up and goes, do you want me to help you with that? And I was like, no thanks, I'm fine. He was like, oh no, I can help. And I was like, no, I'm fine, thank you. He's like, are you sure? I was like, yes, I really don't need any help. And I was getting visibly quite annoyed, and then luckily he walked back to his checkout. I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, leave me alone, I'm fine. And for me personally, I will always ask for help if I need it. If I've bought something heavy, like especially like cat food or laundry detergent or something, I will ask for help. I'm never scared to ask, ever. Like, I'll always ask if I need it. But if I don't ask, it means I don't need it. And so the lady that I mentioned at the beginning of the video I saw said that, when people, especially in places like supermarkets and shops, you would rather have empathy over sympathy, and that's what we get. Well, that's what I get, and that's what people I know who use a wheelchair find so often that happens to them. So I'm trying to get the lighting a bit right. There we go. Sympathy is like, oh, you're in a wheelchair, you obviously can't do anything, you must have help. Oh, I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. But empathy is like trying to empathise, like understand what you need. So if you say, I need help, they will help. If you say, no, I'm fine, they'll just be like, right, you're fine. That's okay, and I know that if you need help, you'll ask for it. And they empathise. And I don't want people like, I'll go into like Marks and Spencer's in town occasionally, and there's a lady in there who goes, oh, good to see you out and about today. How are you managing? And I'm thinking, I actually don't know her at all personally. And it's just really odd to me, because I'm like, well, I'm out and about. Especially, the last 3 weeks, I haven't been out at all because I've been so unwell. And I've been out twice this week into town in my chair to take some parcels to the post office. So obviously, like, if I've obviously not been out and about for a long time, then if someone says, oh, it's nice to see you out, then that's fine. But This is like a time where I'd be in town like every week, like once a week, sometimes twice a week, just doing little bits of shopping or post office or something. And I'm just like, she doesn't know what's wrong with me. She doesn't know why I'm in the chair. She just assumes that I can't walk. Some people always, especially old people, like I'm very careful at coming out of shops slowly so I don't like run anyone over in the high street on the pavement. And some people goes, oh, that's super fast. And I'm thinking, why would you comment that? Like, it's not fast. I've just crept out the shop so I don't run you over. And also, if I'm going along and you see, like, it's usually people either old or people struggling with sticks, or crutches or something, and then they're with someone, the person who's struggling usually says to the other person with them, oh, I could do with one of them. And I'm thinking, never wish yourself into a wheelchair, because it is horrible. It's not a great life. Yes, it helps me get around and it gives me independence, but at the same time, I would much rather be able to walk. And even if it took me ages, and I would love to not be able to. I'd love to be able to like walk and stand up and not feel faint like after 2 minutes. I'd love to walk and not know that I'm likely to fall over. And I'd like to be able to go around the supermarket as a normal person pushing a trolley, not have to wedge a trolley between my legs or put a basket on my lap and my feet, or literally do online shopping or whatever. And that's a comment I get loads. And sometimes it's directly to me. Sometimes I hear it in passing, but I'm like, oh, I could do with something like that. And I think, well, some people I see, like in our town especially, because there's quite a lot of the elderly population. There's a lot of houses especially for people who are older, and like retirement homes and things. And the older people who are clearly like, there's a little old man, he has a stick and he shuffles along and he's so slow. And I think, oh my God, he is so likely to fall. And yes, he wants his independence. My granddad, I mean, he had loads of falls when he was older, and it took him so many years to convince him to even just use a stick. So elderly people are very stubborn, but at the same time, you think he really could do with a wheelchair, and that kind of person I wouldn't wish into a wheelchair. But in this case, he is the kind of person that would benefit from a wheelchair, because he would get places quicker. He wouldn't be at risk of falling, because someone who's frail and elderly, if you fall, you tend to have a longer recovery time, and it really does isolate you. And I just think, it's such a weird comment to make. Children are funny, because children just stare, or they'll like point and go. I once had I think I was going up past a school that I used to volunteer at, and I heard a child go, wow, that lady's got a robot chair. And I was just like, I just love that. I love how honest children are. And like, they'll usually, like, if they're with their parents, they'll be like, Mummy, why is that lady in a wheelchair? Because I don't physically, unless I'm like, go out like this, which I'm not likely to go out in my dressing gown, my hair a mess and all that. I don't look ill. People can't see what's wrong with me. Usually they'll look, and I still do the same. I still judge. Like, if I see someone in a wheelchair, I'll be like trying to figure out what's wrong with them. Sometimes it's really visible, obviously, if people are in a wheelchair and they're strapped in, or their head strapped in, or they're visibly making noises because they have a neurological problem or something like that, then, people still stare. And that's my other thing, is don't stare. Like, we get enough staring from random people. And if you're just curious, just ask. Like, I do get some people ask me, not often, but they'll say, how long have you been in your wheelchair for? And I'll usually say, well, since I got up this morning, because they're asking how long I've been in it, but not like, how long have you had it for? Because then I would say like 4 years or 5 years, or however long it's been. Yeah, 4 or 5 years. So you just need to ask the right questions. And people just assume you can't do anything. It just really annoys me. Like, if I'm picking something up off a shelf and I drop it, if there's no one around, I'll just leave it. and I'll pick the same thing off the shelf, and I'll tell them when I get to the checkout, I'm really sorry, but in whatever aisle it was, I dropped this. It hasn't broken, but I can't pick it up. But usually someone's around and they'll rush to help you. And like the other day, I was coming out of our post office, it's within a newsagent's, and there's a whole other story with that. But basically the doors aren't accessible. It's step free, but the doors are heavy and wooden and open outwards, and then they're all boarded up at the moment because they're all smashed. But this woman came in with her little girl who was only about, I'd say, 4, and the little girl held one door and the lady held the other door for me, and I think that's so nice. And they asked if I was coming out, did I need help? They didn't just assume and hold the doors, because sometimes there's like my doctor's surgery door opens inwards and it's dead easy to open, and I can do it myself. And if someone offers to do it, obviously I'll take them up on it. I won't be like offended. But I think that's the thing, mostly being in a wheelchair, is you get offended quite easily because people have these preconceptions of what like people in wheelchairs need, and until you've been in a wheelchair, you don't know. Like, for example, the path that I take, the pavement that goes into town from where I live, it's really, really flat for a long way, and then it gets very, very bumpy. And the pavement, if you stick to one side of it, is quite flat, but if you end up having to go on the outside by the curb, it's very, very bumpy and very uneven. And for me, it really hurts my back, and it makes me feel a bit sick, and so I need to keep flat. So when I move over to the flat bit, people like look at me as if I'm like taking up the whole pavement, and they don't realise that how bumpy it is. And my husband once used my chair to put it in the car. I think I'd been taken to hospital by ambulance, and even he said he didn't realise how bumpy it is. Like my chair has like tyres that are very thick. They can go over quite big bumps. They can go over quite terrain, like rough terrain. Except gravel. Get stuck in gravel a lot. But I don't, if I can avoid it, I don't want to go over the bumps. And the other thing that annoys me is people seem to think that you have, I feel made to feel like a boat half the time, because you're on a really wide pavement and I have my handbag on my lap. So it's literally the width of my chair, which is like 20 centimetres, and me in the chair. And people see you coming and they move to the side and let you through, which is nice, but there's no need. Their spatial awareness is absolutely shocking. I mean, when you use a wheelchair, I find your spatial awareness gets better, because you have to be able to drive your wheelchair or push your wheelchair, whichever way you do it, around shops, around aisles that are too narrow, or navigate around displays, or in hospitals and doctors' surgeries, the rooms are so small you have to try and get in them and reverse out of them. And so people just like give you room when they don't need to. So I often find if there's obviously a small gap and someone's let you go, I always say thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Thank you. But if people give you room and there's plenty of room, I'll just go straight past and ignore them, because I think I'm not saying thank you to them, because they can still get through. And and it's what's funny is what's happened before is that they've waited and thought, oh, I'm going to let you through, and then someone else just walked straight past them and past me, and then they realise there's enough room, and then they carry on. And I just think, I haven't ever experienced, I'm very, very lucky. I know a lot of people have experienced people shouting at them because you get out your car, because like for me, I can use my legs, but they're not very stable, so I'll get out of my car and people look at you thinking you're parked in a disabled spot and you can walk, and then you get your wheelchair out and they're like, oh, okay, look at the floor, like embarrassed. Or people get called, shouted names, things like that. I've never had that. I've obviously been shouted at for the way my weight and things like that, but that's not really anything to do with why I'm in my wheelchair. Well, it kind of is, but not really. And yeah, it's just really like, just treat someone in a wheelchair the same as you treat anyone else. Don't talk down to them. Talk normally. Like, when I first started using a wheelchair, we were in Debenhams in a cafe, and we went to pay, and I was paying, and the man who was serving at the till talked to my mum and said, oh, it will be however much, how are you paying? It's like, my daughter's paying. She goes, oh, is she paying by card? I'm like, I'm here, ask me. Like, it's just so frustrating. So yeah, treat someone normally. This is my 5 top tips. Treat someone normally as if they're not in a wheelchair, unless, you know, they clearly like need extra help. 2, if someone says no to help, don't persist in like trying to help them, because it will do their head in. 3, really assess whether you need to give them room. If you're going in a supermarket, a pavement, anywhere, just don't make the person in the wheelchair feel worse than they probably already do. 4, don't treat someone as if they're paralysed. Not everyone who uses a wheelchair is paralysed or can't use their legs, or, you know, just think more. And 5 is try a wheelchair out for yourself. Spend a day in a manual wheelchair and see how flipping hard it is, because not only if you're a manual user, I used to be, you have to push yourself around, that's tiring. If you're a powered wheelchair user, it's a bigger, bulkier thing. You have to learn how to drive it properly. When I first used a wheelchair, I think I took out a display in Clinton's, and I was so embarrassed because I broke it. But I couldn't pay for it because the way the display was made it impossible for me to turn my chair around to get out the shop. So they would have to move it anyway. So, you know. But yeah, spend a day, see how hard it is to reach things, to navigate, to see how inaccessible places are. The place that I live is 50-50. 50% of the shops have got like step-free entrances. Some have got automatic doors, which are great. Some shops are old and they've got steps. They're too narrow. Inside, there's no way you could get around. So we face not only having to deal with whatever's our illnesses, we have to deal with the wheelchair too. And that in itself is a nightmare. So hopefully those of you that are in a wheelchair can relate to what I've said. Those that aren't can learn something from this. And yeah, that's me really. And then here's a picture of the wheelchair that I use at the moment, which is a Quickie Salsa M. Yeah, that's it. Bye. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned and click the picture of me on the screen right now, and you can subscribe to my channel. Please like the video and click the bell notification if you want to know when my next videos are put onto YouTube. There should be a box on the screen where you can see other videos I've done. Happy watching.